All right, welcome everyone to another knife review here at Ionan's Edge. This time I bring you the Kunwu Ronin in titanium. Let's jump right in. S35 VN blade steel on a trailing point, upswept type blade. It uses a high flat grind. I know some people might call this a Persian maybe, but it's a trailing point, upswept. It uses titanium scales and hardware all throughout the knife. It is a frame lock design. It rides on dual ceramic ball bearings, and it is manually deployed by a flipper tab. Some basics on the knife. You've got 3.5 inches of usable fine cutting edge from the tip to the back where the sharpening choil is. It's very generous, by the way, so you won't end up with a smiley face. 4 inches to the pivot, and the actual scale length is 4 5/8 of an inch. The overall tip to tail length on this knife is 8 1/8 inches, and it weighed in at a very svelte 3.7 ounces on my digital scale. Let's jump into what I like. First of all, I love the overall design and look of this knife. The upswept blade and the machining all flows together very nicely. They even put some of that machining in here on the little blade cutaway just to add to that. You can notice that the pocket clip isn't just bolted on. It actually flows with the knife, has the same machining inset into it as the rest of the knife does. It's just a really, really great knife overall, look-wise, fit and finish-wise, and materials-wise. The deployment on this knife is perfect. It literally is a drop shutty knife all the time. It doesn't take a lot to overcome the detent. It's not too hard. It's not too soft. It's just right. Perfect. In fact, this knife may be among or right there with the best knives, action and tuning wise, I've ever handled. The Nimble, a few other knives come to mind, but it's right there. This knife is right at the top of the heap as far as action and deployment and lockup and all that stuff. It is really, really well done. And the knife is very fidgety. It's one of those knives you just can't help but have in your hand and use. Like you just want to keep doing that to it. It's amazing. The textured milling on the tie is great. As I said, it all flows well into the design, but it actually does have a good amount of texturing and it does have grippiness to it. So the knife feels really positive in your hand, good ergos. Not a lot of scalloping here. This one's just so that you can get to the frame lock with the steel inset on it and get the knife closed. That's all it's there for, but you can put your hands anywhere you like. I have large glove size hands with slightly wider palm width than normal, but I borrowed this knife, or this knife is on loan from Mattisfaction. He has bigger hands than me, and he doesn't have any trouble getting all 4 of his fingers on this knife. So again, plenty there to hold on to. The knife feels really solid in your hand. No hot spots, even from the pocket clip. And that's another thing I want to point out. Some tie pocket clips are poorly designed. This one is great. It actually has some flex built into it. And the way that they rounded it off here, and it has this really nice long slope. This thing goes in and out of your pocket effortlessly, but yet it holds really well. That is a huge plus. A lot of knife makers, especially a lot of titanium knives, have pocket clips that look like they were an afterthought on the knife. This one is well designed, fits perfectly with the design, flows right up the side, and also is perfectly functional for everyday carry. Yes. The S35 blade has held up really well. I have done some general cutting with the knife, and then I've done some slicing tasks, both in the kitchen and with some other materials out in the garage, and the thing has held an edge really well. Just a little light strop, and the knife was right back to perfect again. So issues or dislikes. So generally, I have no issues with this knife. The Ronin is a really well thought out, well designed knife, and the design is well executed. There are 2 things that I want to make note of, though. While this knife is super slicey, this knife is great for slicing tasks. It's only average for cutting. And that's because of the blade design, right? They did this long upswept blade. So when you're slicing through stuff with this knife, man, it feels really good. And it's not a super thick blade profile either. But when you're doing cutting tasks, you can really notice where the cut wants to roll off the front quarter of the blade a little more, and you have to kind of be mindful of turning your wrist to get through cuts like with cardboard and some other stuff. But it cuts adequately, but it's a great slicer, a great slicer. And number two, the second thing I noticed is that the balance point on this knife is it's very handle heavy. Not terrible. It's not like it's bad, but I always say the pivot point should be on a balance point on a knife should be right behind the pivot on the knife. On this one here, the balance point is 1¼ inches behind the pivot. So it's kind of like right where the top of this scallop is. And it is noticeable when you hold the knife in your hand, not drastically so because the knife only weighs 3.7 ounces. If this were a heavier knife, if this weighed, say, 5 ounces, you would notice that lack of really good balance, being the balance point being up here a lot more. But because this knife is so light at 3.7 ounces, I don't see anywhere to really trim weight on this knife. I think the fact that it's light and it's under 4 ounces definitely makes it, the fact that it's a little handle heavy, a lot less of an issue. If it, like I said, if it were a much heavier knife, that would be more of an issue for me. But it generally does feel good in your hand. You can feel a little more handle weight. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is something I always like to note is where the balance point is. And on this knife, it's right back here near the back of this front finger scallop. So let's do a couple quick size comparisons for you guys. We're going to start with something a lot of people have and know. We're going to do the Demko 8020.5. There we go. Whoops. Let's move that up a little bit so you can see it, huh? There's the Demko 8020.5, and you can see similar blade scale length in the back, less cutting area on the knife, obviously because this is a little bit more of a traditional drop point design. But there's the Demko. And then we're going to bring in something full-sized, bench-made Presidio 2 CF Elite. And you can see that is a bigger knife, but not by a whole lot. It's a little more beefy and stout. But again, this is a tactical knife made for hard use. And I would say this is a general use, everyday carry knife. So there's some size comparisons for you. You get an idea of what this knife looks like on the size chart. So let me summarize real quick. The Kunwu Ronin, it gets so much right. This knife just gets so much right. And as far as you wanting to hold this knife and use this knife, that's going to be an absolute yes. The craftsmanship, the fit and finish on this knife are flawless. All the design elements go well together. It has a usable pocket clip, so it can be carried every day. It's very light. It's fairly thin, so it's not going to take up a lot of room in your pocket. Honestly, once I picked this knife up and started messing with it, I never want to put this knife down. It's just so fidgety all the time, and that's a great thing. There is that small issue with balance, but at $180, and that's what this knife goes for with full tie and S35 VN, this knife checks almost every box for me. When I get the chance, I will be adding this knife to my personal collection. So, yep, I love it. I just want to give a quick shout out to Mattisfaction again for loaning me this awesome knife. I've truly enjoyed my time with it, and I will be keeping an eye on Kunwu's website for the next time that this knife is available to purchase. You can check out all their knives, which are getting to be pretty popular, but this one right here so far is a win for me. So there you go, folks. That is the Kunwu knives Ronin in S35 VN and titanium. Really cool knife. Check it out if you get a chance. Thanks as always for watching. Think about hitting that like button and that subscribe button if you've enjoyed my videos. Have a great day and stay sharp.